Makers are considering changes and a delay to the new law that bans out-of-state trash from being dumped in a Maine-owned landfill. Yesterday's hearing before the Environment and Natural Resources Committee would pause the ban, which went into effect in February, for 2 years. A proposed compromise would allow Casella, which runs the Juniper Ridge landfill near Old Town, to accept roughly 10% of the construction and demolition debris that used to be trucked into Maine from Massachusetts. Casella says it needs more bulky waste to keep the landfill stable and to accept PFAS-laden sludge from municipal wastewater treatment plants. Another law passed last year bans the spreading of sludge on Maine land.
The two laws were diametrically opposed, that you cannot stop the marketing and selling of biosolids as a spreadable fertilizer and at the same time expect them to show up in a landfill and be bulked with nothing.
We do agree that probably in the short term, ensuring that there's additional bulky material that would be available for landfilling will reduce the uncertainty for the wastewater treatment plants primarily.
Casella is now charging cities and towns up to 50% more to truck their municipal sludge well beyond the landfill to New Brunswick in Canada.